Hey, good morning, big bikers. I'm going to try something a little bit different today. We're going to have a ride, but we're going to have a look around. A lookout, the rotary lookout at Gundagai. A really interesting place. One of the things that I've wanted to do as I travel around Australia is actually look at some of the history in some of the certain places where I'm travelling. So really that's what this video is going to be. It's going to be part one of the history of the exploration of Australia. I'm going to change cameras and we'll have a little talk about this place called Gundagai and why it's so important. Now, just to be clear, I'm going to land on the Gundagai side. Just to be clear, this is not anything you can't learn by looking at going to Wikipedia. The dates I'm going to refer to are going to be loose and approximate. And, if you find something interesting and you want to have a look at it in more detail, then certainly go and Google it or have a look on Wikipedia. I'm really just going to talk about, in general terms, the impact that the early explorers had on this country and the way they opened it up and why they opened it up the way they did. So you've got to remember, back in the late 1700s, so 1770, the Americans were getting pretty tired of the British telling them what to do, and so in 1775 the start of the American Revolution began. What was really interesting is that during that period, during the late 1700s, when the Americans were kicking the British out of North America, there was a bit of a challenge being set by some of the British Navy in terms of finding these vast areas of uncharted map, because they had the entire map of the globe had these big empty spaces that hadn't yet been explored. Australia had already been bumped into by some Dutch explorers, Dirk Hartog, who bumped into the west coast of Australia, what was Australia, called it New Holland. And then another Dutch explorer, Abel Tasman, bumped into the south coast of Australia, what is now called Tasmania. But it was all open map. So what the British did was the British Navy said, right, let's send some explorers down and some Navy men and we'll see if we can map the area. They could foresee that the problem with America was they were going to probably have to find some other land so they could dump their convicts and take their world expansion, world domination somewhere else. Very, very broad history lesson here. It's because the Americans were kicking the British out of North America that inspired the exploration of Australia. And so indirectly, you Americans have had some impact on the discovery here. But it was the British sailor, Lieutenant Captain Cook, that about 250 years ago this year actually ran into the east coast of Australia, stuck the flag in the ground and claimed it as British. They were actually being mirrored by the French at the time as well, so the French also had a vessel down here, but history shows that Cook discovered Australia. He was the first British man to bump into the east coast, but he certainly wasn't the first to discover it. There's a whole heap of Aboriginal history there. Obviously, they're talking about hundreds of thousands of years of occupation. I'm not going to go into that. This isn't a political channel. It's the way it was 250 years ago, 250, 300 years ago. It was, if you were more powerful, you'd take it over. And I think it's pretty difficult to retrospectively take the culture and the ideas and the virtues from today and and cast back 200 years and start accusing the people 200 years ago, 250, 300 longer, of not behaving as we would behave today. I think that's pretty emotionally immature. So let's just keep it factual. Let's keep it based on the fact that British explorers were exactly that. They were explorers. I mean, the deck on the Endeavour, which was Lieutenant, soon to be Captain Cook, the deck on his boat was about the size of a tennis court. He took nearly 100 guys around the world. It's mind-blowing. I mean, you know, we got on our bike with our mobile phones and a GPS and we head off into the desert. Whoa, that's adventurous. These guys were just raw explorers, and you know, many didn't make it home, but Captain Cook, he was pretty incredible. And that's really going to be the theme as I talk about these early explorers through Australia. Just the sheer courage born out of it could be stupidity, could be naivety. In a lot of cases it was pretty naive, some of the things they did, but some managed to get by and they just uncovered vast tracts of Australia. Anyway, so in 1770 Captain Cook called the east coast of Australia part of the British Empire, and after the Americans kicked the British from North America in 75 to 83 or something like that, I think the war was, they sent a fleet of first settlers down to Australia to land in Sydney. Long story, but they basically, from the late 1700s, they started to settle Australia and to bring in convicts and build penal colonies and just open up this new land. So there were a few early explorers. You've heard me talk about the Great Ridge of Mountains. It's a little bit to the east of us here, you can't see it, but the Great Dividing Range is a major part of the Australian landscape. It goes pretty much the entire length, nearly 4,500 kilometres down the east coast. And they very quickly discovered that all the rivers on the eastern side of the Great Divide flowed into the ocean, flowed into the Pacific Ocean. What they didn't know was where did the rivers, and there's a river just down here, this river's called the Murrumbidgee River. And there's rivers like this on the western side of the Great Dividing Range. Back in the early 1800s, they wanted to know where they went. Now, there were a couple of schools of thought. There was one explorer called John Oxley. He was really famous for basically navigating a lot of the coastal rivers up and down the east coast of Australia. So he'd take his boat up the east coast. And him and his mate Cunningham, who opened up some of the tracts of land on the west side of the mountain, they determined that there's no way known that the rivers on the western side of the Great Dividing Range could flow into any ocean. They were just simply too far away. So there must be a great inland sea, right? There must be this amazing great inland sea. And when you have a look at the knowledge that the British at the time and the early settlers had of the landscape of Europe and of the landscape of the United States, how inside America there's so many lakes and so many rivers, and in Europe rivers and lakes, massive tracts of fresh water everywhere, massive agricultural areas and water for you know, supporting hundreds and millions of people. And so their thinking was, if the landmass of Australia, because they knew where the west coast was, they knew where the east coast was. There was a fellow called Matthew Flinders who sailed around the entire coastline of Australia and mapped the entire coastline of Australia. And when he came back, they've gone, holy cow, this thing's as big as Europe. It's as big as North America. You know, it's as big as the entire, well, it's the same size as the lower 48. Let me put it in the same kind of geographical area as or landmass as the lower 48. It's about the same size as Western Europe. It's a big chunk of land. It's a big island out in the middle of the ocean. And their thinking was there has to be some fresh water. They've got all these rivers that are flowing from the western side of the Great Dividing Range. They must be flowing somewhere. They must be going into an inland sea. because in their mind all the places that had already been discovered and opened up, and even through large tracts of Africa, there were large freshwater rivers and no inland seas. And it's really interesting, and we'll talk about it at some stage, about how the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer, as you follow them around the globe, have very, very similar landscapes and climates, and the whole of the inside of Africa, South America and Australia being on the Tropic of Capricorn, very, very dry, very arid lands, all of those around the bottom of the world on the southern hemisphere. Anyway, I digress. So what happened was, these early explorers, Cunningham and Oxley, they went out and they said there's no way known that these rivers that flow west of the Great Dividing Range, there's no way known they can flow into an ocean. You know, they don't flow to the east coast. They're way too far to go to the west coast, way too far to go to the south coast, you know, down where what was soon to become South Australia. And they said it's just impossible, so there must be this inland sea. So a lot of the early explorers, when they left Sydney or left Melbourne or left Adelaide, they actually went inland looking for these inland seas. They went looking for, where does the water go? Let's see if there's some agricultural land. Let's see if there's some fertile country that we can actually, you know, support livestock, and very agricultural based. You know, they wanted to grow beef and sheep and wheat, and they wanted to be able to support this new colony of Australia. And the Murrumbidgee River, which is quite a significant river, and I'm going to talk about why it's significant to Gundagai. We're going to go down there and have a look, because it's a great story. And then we're going to go, well, we're not going to do it now, but over the course of the trip that I'm doing as I travel around Australia, is I'm actually going to find the places that were of significant importance to the opening up and the exploration of Australia. And that, you know, if you've watched my series for a while, the number of times I've been out to the desert, we've been to Tibooburra, you know, the places at Inaminka and Birdsville and the Birdsville Track. And we've been to these places that are famous for, and the Dig Tree and Burke and Wills and Charles Sturt and John Stuart and the early explorers that opened up those vast tracts of desert. And we're going to follow those guys. We're going to go and see where they went and have a look at what they did. But today what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to follow we're going to go upstream towards the Tumut River. We're going to follow the Murrumbidgee. There's some roads down there. I've had a look on the map last night. I don't know if they're dirt or not, but we're going to go and have a look, and we're going to follow this Murrumbidgee River and the Tumut River, and we're going to have a look at what these guys saw when they first came out here, because keep in mind they were looking for good agricultural land. They were looking for good grazing land for livestock, so there had to be plenty of fresh water, plenty of open areas, and they needed obviously lots of trees to be able to build you know, houses and buildings and roads and bridges and all sorts of stuff. So that's what we're going to do. We're gonna go, first of all, we're going to go down here. You can see there's a couple of bridges down there. We're going to go down onto what is known as the Murrumbidgee floodplains. And that's where the township of Gundagai was first settled. So in about I think it was about 1829. Don't, you know, correct me if I'm wrong. Don't correct me if I'm wrong. I don't care. Go Google it. I think it was about 1829 that Hume, Hamilton Hume, I think his name was, and John Hovell, I think it was. I'll get the correct names, I'll put them in there. But they wanted to find out if you could get from Sydney to Melbourne and where these rivers went, and if you could go from Sydney to Melbourne, you know, through the inland route rather than sailing down the coast all the time. They were looking for a way, you know, they were looking for pastoral land, and then if there was pastoral land, then how do we get the goods out? And so that's what they did. Now, I don't know if you can see it with this camera, there's a highway there, that big long bridge, and we'll go down for a ride underneath that. It's pretty impressive. That's the Gundagai floodplains overpass, and that is just an incredible structure. It's actually really amazing, but it's part of the Hume Highway. And the Hume Highway goes for about 900 kilometres between Sydney and Melbourne. and that's now the main highway inland of Australia for trucks and shipping of goods. So that's still just down here, near where my caravan is parked, a place where Hume and Hovell stopped in, and they crossed this floodplain when it was dry like that. They crossed the floodplain, followed the Murrumbidgee down to what is now the Murray River, which is the Victorian New South Wales border. So a lot of history in this little town, and it was about 5 years later, Charles Stuart came through, and he was looking to see where these rivers went. They knew the rivers were here because Hume and Hovell came out. They knew the rivers were here, but Stuart wanted to know where they went. Where did they go? He'd already explored the Darling River. That had gone up towards I've got some footage of it because Chris and I were there last year. Just incredible story. I mean, they basically built a whaling boat, took it apart, and built it so that it could be carried in sections, and they would carry it on the back of a bullock dray, and then when they got to an area, they'd put it all back together and seal it up, and go for a paddle up the river to see where it went. But anyway, they went looking. So both Hovell and Hume, just down there where my caravan is parked, just you see that little bridge there, just over there where my caravan is parked, is where these guys crossed the river, and so there's an amazing bit of history down there. But it was Charles Sturt who followed the river all the way down to the Murray River, and then he followed the Murray River. Crazy story. He followed the Murray River all the way down to South Australia to what is now down near Adelaide, down near the Fleurier Peninsula, and it just they got to it and it wasn't navigable. They couldn't get, it turned into a marsh. It turned into a sandy, boggy. It was a delta. You couldn't. There was no mouth of the river. There was nothing. It just turned into this silted up flats, and they couldn't get the boat through. So they actually had to row upstream for 1,500 kilometres to get back. Just incredibly hard men, and they were living off supplies, they were living off the land. I mean, it's just stories that these guys, they just wanted to get back. They went back the way they came, so they rowed upstream for 1,500 kilometres. The whole trip was about 3,000 kilometres, and they'd come to a section where they couldn't navigate the boat over, so they'd pick it up and carry it over and keep on going and camp on the side of the river. And this was when there was nothing but bush and Aborigines, and the way they respectfully treated the Aborigines and got on with them. Not all explorers did it. Charles Sturt's got a reputation for being one of those guys that really respected the relationship between the whites and the blackfella. And so anyway, look, that's enough talking. I'm going to go down here, have a look at these bridges, because when the white fellas first came out here, they settled here and they started building houses in this floodplain through here. and all the black fellas are saying, don't build there because it floods, and they've gone, what would you know? So anyway, sure enough, guess what happened? In 1852, there were about 250 houses down there. There's a car coming, it's going to get noisy. Let's go and have a look and I'll tell you the story down there. Yeah, it's just really rich country though. It's, by comparison to the barren wasteland of the West, this is just incredibly fertile country. And it wasn't until they first discovered gold here that they realised not only was it good sheep country and good agricultural land, that there was riches beneath the ground. And in a lot of cases, a lot of the early explorers who just had no idea what they were looking for walked straight over the top of some of the largest, deposits of minerals, and opals is a good one. I mean, when John McDougall Stuart found Cooper Pedy, which is one of the richest opal mines in the world, they missed it. But we're going to get to Cooper Pedy eventually on this trip, and
we're just going to wander around the country and have a look at some of these old things. And I'm going to ride when it's time to ride, and then we'll talk when it's time to talk. And I don't want to bore you, and so I'm really keen on your feedback as to whether or not you're actually interested in some of this history and some of the stuff that I'm doing, because you know, it's interesting to me, but it might not be interesting to you. So that's the Murrumbidgee River. That's the caravan park just down there. Because these are the old bridges. So these bridges were built in the late 1800s. Like this one was finished. This is the rail viaduct. This one was finished in 1903. It's not used anymore, obviously, because it's pretty rickety. But I'll throw the drone up and I'll show you those bridges from the air, because they're pretty impressive. But yeah, so where we are now is on the floodplains. We're on the Murrumbidgee floodplains at Gundagai, and it's quite a tragic story here, because they knew, they were told by the local Aboriginal tribes that don't build your houses here because, you know, it floods. And after the tragedy I'm going to tell you about, they realised they needed the bridges to be up high. They're in pretty poor condition now, though, obviously. Look at that. But they're historical structures now. There's a monument over here, and I'll read you what it says, because it's a pretty tragic story. And up until Cyclone Tracy in Darwin in the 1970s, this was our largest tragedy, I suppose. So this, it just says, this cairn commemorates the National School and the drowning of the Master and Mistress McKenna and their 5 children, and also 82 other residents, on June 12th, 1852. It was put there by the Gundagai Shire Council and Apex and Lions clubs. So there's a big chunk of marble up there. So what happened is this floodplain, and it was at about midnight on the 12th of June 1852, this massive wall of water came through, and there were about 100 odd houses. There was about 250 people, well, 100 structures. There was about 250 people all living on this floodplain, and 82 of them died that night. It's a pretty tragic story, and that up until as I said, Cyclone Tracy in Australia, that was our worst natural disaster. So that was over 100 years. That was pretty bad. If you're interested in the history of the country, it's really worth calling into. Now, there's lots of guys that live close to the area, and I know they'll probably be correcting me on a few points, but I'm just giving a rough overview. So that was in the 1850s. So they found it in the late 1820s, 1830s. It was then kind of started to be settled from there. So in about a decade, there's about 250 people living in this flats, these floodplains. I'll put some footage of these bridges in I got from the drone. Yeah, but it was pretty tragic. And there's actually a monument down here, because, and in fact I'll go past it because it's pretty interesting. A couple of the local blackfellows were down here with their pretty much bark canoe. I'm talking tree bark. And this bridge here is called the Yarri Bridge. So there's two fellows, one's called Jackie Jack and the other called Yarri, and there's a monument to them. And they rescued about 40 people with their canoe. And I'm not going to go into detail in the history of Gundawindi. You can look that up. But what I'm doing is I'm retracing the steps of some of our early explorers, and we're going to have a little look at Charles Sturt, because he repeats himself quite a lot through history in Australia. He was quite a profound explorer, very, very good at Australian bushcraft. So there's a little monument there to Yari and Jackie in their little canoe. So if you keep in mind that, you know, a lot of these areas, when they first came here, in fact, you have a look at some of the images and the paintings from the early 1800s when they first came out here in the mid 1800s. A lot of these areas were very similar to how they are now. I mean, obviously, probably a few more trees around, but the river course is pretty much exactly the same as where it was and where it has been for, you know, centuries. So I'm going to make a political comment here. It really annoys me when people, virtue signalling or social justice warriors, try to change history. They try to change the fact that, you know, we've got an English ancestry. The English were the explorers, the Europeans were the explorers, the French and the Dutch, the Spanish, the Portuguese. They were the explorers. That's what they did. Their culture is different to the one that was here. You know, in the same way the Spanish discovered, you know, South America and the Americas, you know. It was a completely different culture to what was there. And at some point, the cultures need to either integrate or not, you know. And some things that happen that probably we wouldn't do these days, but we can't change what did happen. Anyway, I try to keep this channel apolitical because, you know, everybody's got different views, but if it's not motorbike related, I choose not to talk about it too much. But you know, this particular episode is all about you know, some of the early explorers that found their way through this area. So we're going to go and have a look at that. When I get to a nice spot, I might throw the drone up. A different perspective. Here we go, some dirt, traction control. So the river, the actual river, according to the map, follows the tree line around the base of those hills over there, but it then comes back down around here. So this is still the Murrumbidgee down here. Murrumbidgee River. Footsteps of the explorers, although I think they're on the other side of the river. I know probably on the camera it looks like it's a little bit brown, but underneath the top of the grass is quite green underneath. And we are heading into, it's autumn now, so heading into our dry season. So I've just stopped to have a look at the map, and this river here where you can see the line of trees, That's actually the Tumut River, and it flows down there to kind of out over the other side of that paddock, flows into the Murrumbidgee River. Now, I'm just looking at the map. I've actually got to go all the way, but I've got to go up the Tumut River and cross over that and then come back down around to get to the Murrumbidgee. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to end up, I'll probably have to go to get some fuel, because I didn't do that before I left. I was too busy talking. Anyway, there's a couple of places where I can get fuel. So, good thing about these areas is that you're actually not that far away from a small service centre or country town, which is nice. Unlike travelling around in further west, you're literally hundreds of kilometres between, anything that looks like service. I should be right. I've got probably about 120 kilometres in the tank, but just got to do a little bit of doubling back. Just taking it nice and easy today, folks. Having a look around. Going back to the Tumut River. Very picturesque. Probably not allowed to camp here because it's private property, but let's have a little look here. It's a beautiful spot though. Oh, here we go, there's a little fire pit there. And we get up here. Oh, it's pretty rocky. Alright, so let's keep following this river. It's still on the Tumut River. So that is Tarrabandra Rd, the one we just went on, and we're back now on the Brundle Road. So apart from there being probably a few less trees right now, this is probably very similar to what the early explorers came across when they started following these river systems. Now, I had a bit of a look when I stopped earlier to have a look at where the Murrumbidgee goes, and it flows up into a dam quite a way north of here, so I might go for a bit of a ride next week and check that dam out. It looks like some pretty interesting stuff in there. I'd have to get away pretty early in the morning, so it's going to be cold, but at least go and have a look at that, and then we'll come back around and we'll have a look at the Blowering Dam as well, which is actually quite large. In fact, we might even do that today if we've got time, because that's actually not far from Tumut, so we'll see how we go. Oh, there's a what? You're a long way from home, buddy. Can you see what that is? Yeah, you are. What are you doing here? Hey? I don't think you're supposed to be this far north, are you? And east? Yeah. And you're by yourself. Where's the rest of the gang? The stupidest bird alive. If you've been watching my channel a while, you'll know that stupid birds. Hey, look at me. Thank you. All right. Yeah, what's that? They're curious. You coming with me? Well, that's just weird. An emu at Brungle. Well, I didn't expect to see an emu. I've got to admit. I'll have to find out from Scotty as to whether or not they're a thing. I know there's deer and roos and all sorts of stuff around here, foxes and rabbits, but emu. Arriving in Tumut. Deep in autumn. Look at that. And here's the Tumut River again. So yeah, like it's probably going to be the end of the whole early explorer section for this video, but let's go and have a look around. I think this dam was built obviously mid 1900s, and let's go and check this out. I don't even know if there's any dirt up here. I probably won't see dirt again for the rest of the day. Famous last words. There's always that, what's up that road? Guilty as charged. I'm always doing that. I think this is the way. Oh, yeah, that's right. I need to get fuel. That's pretty expensive. Fortunately, I don't need much. I'll be back in a minute. Snowy Mountain Highway, we're on the road out to the dam wall. It's part of the COVID-19 prevent the spread. Haven't had any incidents out here at all. Wow. So that's all closed. I'm not going to go up there at this stage. It won't be long, I don't reckon, before they release all those things and allow us to do all that. But I might, there's the damn wall. Might throw the drone up. I don't know how much battery I've got left, so I'll have a look. I might be able to at least get up the wall and have a look at the dam. So let's do that. Look at these colours. Hey, thanks for joining, coming along. Always good to have you join in. Let me know, give me some feedback as I follow the early explorers around and visit the monuments and the markers from their trip. Let me know if it's of interest to you, and if you've got some more information about a particular area I think I'll be interested in visiting, let me know. Alright. Thanks folks. Shall talk to you later. So, I just went whizzing past this road and where does that go? Had a quick look on the map and it'll take me to where I want to go. So we go this way. Much more interesting than the highway. So this is actually taking us back towards the Tumut River. There's the Tumut River right there. It's a bit much like a farm road, this one. We're all right. All good. You remember earlier I said I probably won't ride any more dirt today. But then I put the caveat in, you never know. Not much of a road. Well, this is still on the map. Still the road. Yeah. I'll just go the short way home. Obviously by myself as well, so just want to be careful. Look at that. So I just changed the battery in the camera. I didn't want to miss this. pretty steep. Landmines around. Look at that. Fantastic. How cool is that? Oh, keeps going all the way around. Private property though, so we'll just take it easy. That's the road we're going on down there. Alright. First gear. Lots of engine braking. Although those traction aids are pretty good. Digging its way up the hill. Very good. How cool is that? Alright, hey, I think we can hit the bitumen in a moment. And then alright, talk to you later. Thanks guys.